Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us for today. I'm really grateful that you're here. Welcome to Dr. G's Think Tank on Resilience. We are talking today about something that has been much in the news and that I have some really particular questions about. Something that is often the kryptonite to people being resilient, especially at work, and that is loneliness. So let me welcome one of our guests. Maya Irvin currently serves as the Chief Impact Officer at JUV, a purpose-driven company dedicated to empowering diverse young people. At night, Maya is a part-time graduate student at Fordham University, pursuing her MBA in Marketing and Global Sustainability, as well as a podcast host of Big Fish, Sink or Swim, a platform for and by Black Zillennials. Maya, are you seeing loneliness impact resilience in the workplace?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. G, for having me and for that great introduction. Excited to see everybody here. But to answer your question quickly, I think the answer is yes, for sure. As Dr. G kind of quickly alluded to, I work for a purpose-driven marketing company, but that marketing company is ran almost entirely by Gen Zers. And for those of you who don't know, Gen Z obviously deals with a lot of mental health, is more likely to be open about their mental health, but they're also the generation that feels loneliness the most. So we definitely see that impacting what they expect from us as leaders in the organization to provide for them for their ability to get through the workday, right? Because loneliness affects your mental health, it affects your output, it affects your creativity, and you work for a marketing company. We also see folks asking for us to do more in-person things as a company that works hybrid and mostly remote. Our team uses the term body doubles. I don't know if that's a real term, but that's a term that they use just to have somebody on Zoom with you, just to work together and sort of like be in the same space, even though it's remote. So I would say yes, that it definitely
Okay.
impacts what they are requiring us to provide for them to get through the day for sure.
So I call that with a couple of my friends parallel play
Mm,
or study hall.
mm-hmm.
Just, it's not that I need you to do anything about what I'm doing. I just need there to be
Be
somebody
there.
else who's there. Body double.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay. All right. I'd like to introduce you to Leah Alla. Leah is the Senior HR Director at Builders First Source. She currently leads the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts there. She began in an entry-level role after working in the hospitality and retail industries 19 years ago, and has advanced through half a dozen roles at least in her tenure there. Leah, are you seeing loneliness impact resilience in your workplace?
Well, thank you as well, Dr. G, for inviting me, and good to see the rest of the panel and everyone else there. Absolutely, right? I think if I think about Builders First Source and the organization and just how in the 19 years it's evolved, we have a lot of team members that have been around for quite some time and have made this their career. And it's that older generation or the boomers that are used to holding it in and not asking for help. But you can definitely see that there is some effect, right, in the workplace. And then you've got the other team members that have come in recent years that maybe don't understand it and want to feel a part of a team. And so you see loneliness translate from home to work, right? And it's really trying to figure out the balance between the two. How do we help people in their personal lives and how do we help them as well when they're in the workplace?
I just want to ask you a quick follow-up question. You said even with boomers who might not be so culturally inclined to speak it, you see it. What do you see?
Oh, disconnection. Um, some of them will, if you can get them to talk to you, will tell you, I don't really feel like there's no place for me here. I don't feel like the team, but there's a disconnect in how they engage with the other team members from the break room to the think tank, right? Where we sit and have ideas and sit at a table and we ask for suggestions, safety meetings, who's reserved, who's not. Is there something deeper going on that we really need to dig into?
Thank you. That's really interesting because I think often people imagine that when we see something difficult in someone's mental health expressing itself at work, we see behaviors we don't want, as opposed to the lack of behaviors we do want, which
Hmm.
is, I think, some of what you're describing. Okay.
Absolutely.
Lastly, I'd like to introduce you all to Philip Frank. Philip is currently at Ravensburger, a leading games and puzzle company. Philip holds the title, get this, of Global Head of Games. How cool is that? With a 25-year career spanning diverse consumer goods and service companies, Philip has left his mark at Scandinavia Airlines, Electrolux, Helly Hansen, and now Ravensburger. Every step of the way, he's championed the cause of bringing people together. Philip, are you seeing loneliness impacting resilience in the workplace?
Yes, I do. And maybe I should first comment on the title. My niece can't believe that someone can be head of games. So it puts a lot of pressure on me to be the fun uncle here. Yeah, I mean, of course we do, right? And it's I think also when people don't feel seen, when we are not communicating purpose clearly enough, that creates a distance. And I had, several of our team members that actually left after the pandemic, which I thought was very clear because we had not been in contact together. We had not communicated clearly together what we were trying to do. And the loyalty disappeared when you don't feel connected. So I think loneliness absolutely has an impact. And tells me that we have to talk about it and work on it to create, resilience against it in the workplace.
And that's a really interesting point, that loneliness undermines loyalty. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so Leah, if you don't mind, I'd like to start by asking you our central question for today, because I came at this, and when I first started to talk about how I wanted to talk about loneliness for leaders and about resilience in the workplace, I got some pushback from folks who were, now that I think of it, more in the boomers and Gen X generation, saying, how is this a work thing, right? Like, it's a life thing, sure, but how is this a work issue? And Maya, I'm betting that you have a whole list of things that people would say that about, and you have opinions about those. But Leah, will you focus on this for me for right now? What could individual leaders do to impact employee loneliness? And do you think it's a part of our responsibility to our organization's mission, right, to the purpose of the work itself, to put resources into this?
Oh, absolutely. So even if I just think solely about Builders First Source, right? We are constantly talking about our values and what we call our SPICE: safety, people, integrity, customers, and excellence. We say that effective leaders guide and coach, right? Effective leaders guide and coach. And often when we're coaching, right, what we're bringing to the table at work translates to home and vice versa. I think if we're going to be effective, we need to understand that loneliness can limit team performance, that it can reduce creativity, which also can, impair the way we look at things, right? What decisions are we making? Are we being reasonable at work? And do we feel like other people are being reasonable with us? I think as an organization, we got to really focus on what's the impact and ask at least two questions. That is, what resources do we have to support those folks that may be experiencing loneliness outside of the workplace? And what resources do we have internally to ensure that they don't feel lonely at work? Because people can feel lonely around other people, right? And we have to have a solve for that. If we think about how do we support loneliness outside of the workplace, it could be simple. What benefit offerings do we have that allow people to connect and get the help they need? That could be our mental health benefits. It could be, do we have an EAP program that supports mental health, right? Where people can be open to having discussions.
And what does EAP stand for?
I'm glad you said that. I am an acronym girl. Employee assistance programs.
Thank
So
you.
what employee assistance programs do we have? And is it geared toward, right, more than creating wheels, right, or things of that nature, right? What happens when people have changes in their life, like health changes, natural disasters, right? Weight gain. There's so many different things personally that go on with us that translates right into the workplace. Now, when we think about the workplace, it's, are we putting programs together that help develop our team members? Are they feeling overwhelmed? What factors could we have that limit their engagement, that make them feel lonely when they're at work? So what team engagements do we have, right? What type of events? And are we being inclusive? Are we including everyone? And if we do that, right, we can have a team full of resilient people. But I think we have two solves. It's a out of workplace solve and an in workplace solve. You have to have those.
And so for the out of workplace, I'm hearing you say, first of all, you might not even know what you don't know about stuff you already have access to. That's already a part
That's
of
right.
people's packages. And certainly most employees don't know what we don't know, because maybe
That's
you
right.
look at that email or that packet when you first get it, maybe, and anything that doesn't apply to you right that minute, your brain just disregards. So
Yeah.
you don't think about, it has, maybe there's a grief package, but you're not grieving, so you forget that that exists.
Mhm.
But also, even within companies, leaders may not have taken in all of the opportunities that they have to help people outside of work. And then you said two really important things about at work. You said both, what could we be doing to decrease loneliness in teams? And you also said, what are we doing that's exacerbating loneliness, that's making it worse, probably by accident? Like, very few leaders are saying, well, why don't you go sit on the bottom step and think about how you behaved? But
That's right.
but people may be hearing something that you said to mean they should be working more alone, or that they're not enough. Or are we accidentally excluding people just by not inviting them in a way that works for them?
I think there's a lot of accidental, right, in what we do during the day. We put labels on people, or we put people in boxes, and we think they don't want to engage in a certain way, and we leave them out, right? That's not what Leah does. That's not her cup of tea, or she wouldn't want to input. She doesn't have much to say when we come to the table. But have
Or
we
she's
asked
busy
Leah what?
enough,
Yeah, I'm busy
right?
enough, right? And so we often leave people out, not intentionally, which obviously makes them feel lonely. And it translates, right? As I don't really feel a part of the team. I don't feel connected. I think Flip said it, right? When people leave, like post-pandemic, they're missing something, right? There's a reason why they don't want to continue to be engaged, and they start second guessing the organization and how it can be. Is this the right place for me? Right? There's
Yeah.
been so much going on. I'm not sure this is the right place for me. So now I'm going to make a decision to leave. And we just have to do a better job, right, in all organizations, and making sure that we see, right, people, because when we see them, I think we can identify that, hey, they might need something, something might be going on. What do we have? And to your point, we have tons of benefit offerings. It's a big book, right? I don't think everybody has it memorized, but do we have the simple things like the right posters up? Do people know we have an EAP program, right? Do people understand what their benefits are? Are we doing benefit talks, right, with our teams or with the leaders that can at least have those engagement opportunities? What are we including in our monthly meeting notes that relate to benefits? Just
Mhm.
anything that brings it top of mind for the team
More
members.
emails that people won't read. Okay.
You know
All right.
what? All the emails.
All the emails. So, Philip, you made a really compelling point for why leaders should care, right? You said that that loneliness can undermine loyalty when people don't feel connected, when they don't have purpose. What can individual leaders do to impact their employees' loneliness? And in addition to retention, do you think there are other reasons that it's our responsibility to work on this, to put resources towards this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the starting point to me is that I'm struck by the, how little we talk about loneliness when it's such a societal problem that I think in many ways can be solved. So it baffles me that that loneliness is not a discussion that you hear about in media at any time, and that is rarely spoken about in the 4 companies I've been at. And so, I'm personally privileged enough to work for a company that where the mission is to make games and toys for the hand, the head, and the heart, and where for 140 years the intention was to bring people together. So, that in itself, of course, helps.
But even so, you're saying at a company whose whole purpose is to bring people together, they're still not talking about loneliness among the employees.
No, of course, we naturally bring people together by playing games. So
Right.
there's a benefit of being here. But I would, I have this, I'm Swedish, right? So I have, for example, there's a fantastic culture in the US, which is about pickup games. To me, that's an amazing activity, right? You show up and you say next, and you know nobody. I think you can do that in the workplace too. How do you create
Is this only
situations?
basketball and chess that people do pickup games about? Is there anything else that I'm not thinking of?
I think you
Tell us
can
in
do
the
pickup
comments.
about everything,
Let me
right?
just say, anybody who has questions, please drop them in the chat. We have a whole time period for that. So we really want to hear about those. And Liz says soccer and football, you can both play pickup.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. You can, you can play game pickup, right? You can sit at a table and have someone show up. You can do lunch pickup. You can do a bunch of stuff. The idea of creating situations where you can just show up and say next, and even better, if there can be a reoccurrence around them, I think is something that you can really implement in companies. So, but you got to think about it. Like you got to look at it as something that you purposefully do. And as Leah said, there's so much accidental. I think if we're more purposeful about loneliness, then you can really come up with stuff. Pickup being one thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent idea. What would be your argument to leadership? Let's say a different company, because I'm not trying to get you in trouble. If somebody brought you into a different company to speak to the board and they said, why should we be taking time from people's day to worry about this? What would be your argument that this matters?
I mean, everyone wants to be seen. I think I said that from the beginning. If in a world where maybe we don't know what's going on in people's life at home, so if at least we can make sure that our teams are seen, I think that has a direct impact on performance. If we can be a bit playful, which takes away some of this hierarchical feeling, and you can make people feel relaxed in their environment, I think you create an environment of psychological safety or just warmth. I think people feel less lonely, and they will do a better job. But it's also about just being human, right? So yeah, we go to work partly to be social, I would think. So just by going to work, I think a lot of people get out of loneliness, and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, Maya, would you talk both about what individual leaders could do in their workplace to impact loneliness, and also your arguments if your company was hired to consult with a big company that said, why should we care about this? What would your arguments be to them about why it's worth putting resources towards this?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I feel like that question happens so much in real time. Especially if you are a HR person advocating as to why you should be allowed budget on certain things. But I just feel like there's so many valid answers. One, it's my personal belief that businesses have an obligation to care about the people that are operating them. To me, that's just
Whoa.
I know, mind blowing. But that's just me. But in terms of like data, I think it's important to actually show up for the people, again, that are operating your business. By 2025, 27% of the workforce will be Gen Z, and these are the things that they're requiring, right? Even outside of Gen Z, millennials have definitely shifted the way that we are thinking about the workplace. And if we want folks to actually have the ability to work for us, we're going to have to meet them in the middle somewhere, right? And I think it's important for everybody to really lean into this idea of how can I show up for anybody else if I cannot show up for myself? So thinking about how that loneliness is impacting that person, and thinking about how that then impacts their output, how they're going to show up for work, if they can even show up for work, right? So I think that all of those things are super, super important to think about when we're thinking about the future of work and where work is going. But because the way that this younger generation has approached some of their changes, I think that can be off-putting for some. But I think folks have to remember that each generation has impacted workplace and work culture, right? Like after World War II, workplaces were set up to be like factories, right? And everybody had to be like, this is not beneficial. We like to collaborate. We like to talk to each other. We like to work together. We like there to be some type of connection. And there was an adjustment, right? So it's not just this generation that's fighting for something new or something that's beneficial to the employees. But I think this is different for a lot of folks. A lot of generations may not be used to talking about this, but we sort of have to break out of that taboo, break out of the bubble, and see that this is what this next generation of employees are asking for. So in terms of what actual leaders can then do to maybe combat loneliness, is one thing that we do a lot of at Juve is create opportunity for community that has nothing to do with work, that has nothing to do with the bottom line, right? We have meetings, we have opportunity to get to know each other and connect on bases that have nothing to do with our job or getting further or getting more money. Every Friday, we have a Friday call that is simply about being around each other and having fun, right? And on that Friday call, we might do a bunch of different things. We might do a team brainstorm that's like actually fun and has nothing to do with our clients. Or like this Friday, because it's Black History Month, we have like a Black History Month scavenger hunt where you have to like find things that were made by African American folks, right? Or African American inventors. So I think that finding opportunities for folks to actually connect, get to know each other, and expose them to other folks is super important, but also understanding why you're doing it, right? So like using Gen Z, for example, Gen Z actually wants to go into the office, right? Gen Z actually wants human connection. But the difference between Gen Z and other generations is that we don't want to go into the office because we think we'll do our job better in the office. We want to go to the office because we actually want to connect with people, because we want to build community, right? So maybe when you're asking us to come to the office, it's not about coming to the office to complete a task, but it's about coming to the office to do something with your team member. It's about coming to the office to do something together as a company, right? So I think really
Not the cubicle is what you're saying.
Exactly. So narrowing down what folks want and meeting them there, and also combining that with an opportunity to expose them to the folks that are within their organization or with each other.
That's really interesting to me for a bunch of reasons, but we have some great questions. So before I talk, I want to get to some of the questions that we have. One that came up is about women having kids and the loneliness or the disconnect that can spike when that happens. This person said, I found it really hard to adjust to the social part of work when I came back from maternity leave. Instead of going out for drinks or anything after work, suddenly I was headed home as fast as I could. Even lunches changed for me. I more often worked through lunch so I could get out of the office or be less distracted at home. And I've seen other women struggle with this too. And I want to point out that it's not only women who feel a change when there's a baby at home, that all of a sudden their priority shift, their time is used differently, their sleep changes. So for anybody who's coming back from a major shift in their household, I wonder, should we think of their loneliness maybe differently, or is it just more urgent or an obvious pain point we can push on?
It's very interesting, right? Because earlier I said that, circumstances in your life, right? Those changes, and like having babies or having a new baby can change what's going on in your home, which affects work. Because think about it, we are at work 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day. We leave work, we go home, we cook dinner, we wash clothes. If we have children, we feed the babies, and we go to bed and we get back up and we come to work. We don't have a lot of reprieve, right? And so I'm exhausted now. I'm overwhelmed at home. And now I've got to get up and put my thinking cap on at work. Well, I really feel disconnected. So my thinking cap ain't thinking like it used to be, right? I'm not as creative. My resiliency is getting to the point where I don't know if I got enough jump start in this battery to keep me going. And I don't know how to balance what I have going on at home with what I have going on at work. I don't necessarily say all that to say that I have an answer, but I do think we have to think about it differently.
Maya, do you have any suggestions, to Leah's point, about either onboarding or when people return from any kind of leave? Let's just assume that any leave has to do with a disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your schedule and your health and your family and something. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for folks that they could say, anytime I'm onboarding someone new or bringing somebody back from leave, here are a couple of questions I should really think about asking to head some of these issues off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a manager, or as a direct manager for a few of my direct reports, I think it's important for there to always be a talking point that has nothing, again, to do with their role, has nothing, again, to do with their development within the role, how they're doing within the company. Not saying that those things aren't important, because there's time and place to talk about those things as well. But there also needs to be a talking point about how you are doing as a person, right?
Mhm.
And how you feel like you are performing and how you feel comfortable in this position and with these tasks and in this role, etc. I actually just had a direct report that just came back from leave yesterday. She took leave for 2 weeks for mental health reasons, because she felt like she wasn't performing her best. And transparently, I picked up on that, right? Like I picked up on that and had to have a conversation with her about, hey, I see there's something going on. I want to have a conversation about why this is. Let's have that conversation, right? Even approaching that conversation with the benefit of the doubt tone of like, there must be something happening that's preventing you performing at your best self, rather than, girl, what the hell are you doing? Why are you not performing your job?
Remove this obstacle now.
Exactly, right? And that's something we picked up on immediately, and was like, we need to have a conversation about like, there's obviously something that's happening in her life. So I think one, managers have to be people managers, because most of my job is people management. And I think that as we continue to think about how AI is going to affect the workforce and taking a lot of those tasks away from managers, a lot of our jobs will actually be people management, is my assumption. And I think a part of that people management is being aware and picking up on those cues so you can have those questions. But in terms of when they come back, to me, the first question is always, how are you doing? What is the best way that I can support you back into your transition? And making that clear that it's not just about your role, but your transition back into the company as well, right? And then I also think that back to the question about, how do we work with folks who may have experienced different types of loneliness, or loneliness stems for different reasons. I think that that's kind of always going to be the case, because we can never say whose loneliness is stemming from what, right? But I think that, again, it's important to have these conversations one-on-one with your direct reports to have an understanding as to where they're at, what they need, and also creating opportunity outside of lunch, outside of after work, for folks to get to know each other, right? Like at Juve, we have 15-minute recess, where that's just 15 minutes of like blow bubbles, 15 minutes of adult coloring books, right? And it's just to be in community, and it's just to get a break from your work. So I think we have to think really creatively about how we do that, and also not be scared to give away company time for that, because this will benefit your employees.
And Maya, you talked about, sorry, Dr. G, if I can just answer back. You talked about earlier how there's generational differences. Gen Z wants to be in the office. We have a bunch of millennials in our company, and we're learning that they want feedback every day when they're in the office. If you don't give them feedback on their work, on their job, they'll feel, unseen and lonely. So adopting leadership styles to specific events in your life, or even generational expectations, I think, all go together here.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to quickly, address the question in chat about folks who want to sort of rejuvenate in solitude. I think that, to your point, there should also be room for that as well. Like, our recesses are not mandatory. We do not want to require folks who actually get increased anxiety from being in groups to attend that recess in a way to decompress, right? So I think that there also needs to be opportunity for folks to have, I think that you can have and or, it doesn't have to be either or. Or I think it's and, either or.
Yeah. And solitude can be a form of self-care, right? Solitude does not have to be loneliness. I saw a quote recently, I'm going to read it. It says, loneliness is the poverty of self. Solitude is the richness of self, right? Like, part of my routine is I do like a little solitude, right? But it's different than being lonely. And so it's figuring out that difference and saying, hey, if you want solitude today, you can have it. This is not mandatory. I think when we see people who are always detached, we have to kind of do what Maya did and see them and say, hey, how can I support you? Right? I'm noticing that you're not participating in this or that. Is there something I can do for you? Is there, what do you think? What do you suggest? And so I think we have to be able to differentiate that, because there is a difference, right, between loneliness and solitude.
Some people feel lonely when they're forced to be in a group, as we talked about earlier, and wouldn't feel lonely if they were on their own getting the solitude they needed.
Absolutely.
Philip, the next question that's come in, I'd like to bring to you first, because you told me a story, so I know you faced this yourself at work. Alana wanted to know, what 2 things would you do specifically for an employee who says, I'm lonely?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends, of course, of the person asking that question, but
Awesome.
that's number one. And I think it can be scary if that happens in a plenum with a lot of people around. I think you have to be careful and maybe take that discussion separately, or acknowledge it. But I think the thing is, of course, to sit down and to acknowledge it and to discuss it. And I think you said it yourself before. Ask what I can do, anything I can provide, and go down that route. Right? It's we don't talk much about taking someone's hand at work, but if you can offer a hand, I think that's a nice thing to do, even in a professional environment.
I saw your eyes light up, Philip, when Maya said recess at work. And I think
recess.
I might see something new headed for Ravensburger. So I'd like to throw that question to you, Maya, about what 2 things this person asked would you do if someone said to you, hey, I'm lonely?
Yeah. So the first thing I would ask is, what ways that we could support them within their organization or within the organization. I think that that question is super important because all organizations are different. Like, you could be a very big company that has lots of resources to be able to support your employee, or here at Juve, we are 7 years in, but we still are very much a startup with no investors and very much bootstraps on the ground type of vibe. So there are certain things that we may not be able to do, but we want to show up for our employees the best way that we can. So my first question would be, is there anything that we could do here at work to better help you in your loneliness, right? Like whether that's coordinating more in-person connections with your manager rather than you guys continuing to connect virtually, whether it's coordinating more time for you and your actual team to get together, right? Because we don't have a mandated in-office policy, but we do have this caveat that if your manager requests for you to be in person for a meeting, you obviously have to show up for that meeting, right? And if there's any other ways that we can support that. And if the answer is no, then the next question for me is, well, how can we support you in getting you what you do need then? Right. So if the answer is, well, it actually has nothing to do with work and there's nothing that you all can help me with, and I have some issues that I need to sort out outside of this, I think that that's also totally fine. But as an organization, right, to Leah's point, we have EAPs, right? We have benefits that can help you find the support you need, right? Your EAP can help you find a doctor, it can help you find a babysitter, it can help you find a therapist, it can help you find rehabs if you need it, right? All these types of things. So that would be my first question, because I also never want to assume where somebody's loneliness is stemming from or what they need to combat that.
You know
And
what,
I
and
really
not to
like,
interrupt you, Maya, I think you also have to realize that they came to you and said, hey, I'm lonely. So even if you look at that last question and they say it's not work related, there's nothing you can do, they came to you for a reason, right?
Exactly.
And you got to be able to dig into it. You might not be able to solve for that day, but are we following up, right? Or do we just have the conversation and walk away? Follow
Yeah.
up is going to be super important.
Yeah. And I love that piece, because one thing that we're finding as younger generations continue to get into the workforce is that they're requiring employers to do a lot more than they've ever done before on behalf of them, right? Like all the way down to educational resources, because they feel like colleges are no longer preparing them for their actual jobs, right? So I think that we do, to Leah's point, have, in my opinion, an obligation to tap into that, even when it isn't work related, right? Because that
Mhm.
person clearly felt comfortable enough to come to you and share that vulnerability.
and just that connection moment
Yeah.
it's a compliment to you that they came to you with it, and it's a bridge to a
Yeah.
conversation. So the reason that I brought this topic to a think tank on resilience is because in my work, I define resilience as the ability to navigate change towards a positive goal. And navigating change is the thing that makes our brains feel at risk and overwhelmed, and by definition, stressed. It is change that causes the amygdala to push out these stress chemicals. That's how we define the feeling that we say when we're stressed. And when we feel alone, it turns out our amygdalas are twitchier. They put out more stress chemicals when there's change because we feel less safe, less fundamentally safe. Our brains have a chemical bias towards belonging, whatever that means to us, which is not the same as being an extrovert. And you can have solitude and still feel a deep sense of belonging. So I'm not trying to talk about where we spend our time or how many bodies we want to be in the room with. But when our brains perceive that we don't belong, then our brain thinks, I might be alone with that saber-toothed tiger. I might be alone with starvation. There might be nobody else to help me in the work of getting the resources that we need just to live, just to be safe at this really basic chemical level. So that feeling of loneliness and not being a part of something we want to be a part of, that undermines our ability to navigate change. And then I found this conversation super interesting because what we keep coming back to is connection, not necessarily, nobody has said throw a big party. That's the answer, right? For a lot of people, they never feel lonelier than when they're at a big party.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it happens to be a party for them, for some people, right? Where they know everybody in the room. So we're not saying contact, social contact is the answer. We're saying social connection is the answer. And some of the things that I've learned from you in this conversation that have been so helpful is Leah, you really taught me that often we interrupt or disrupt or prevent connection by accident and don't even realize it, not just unintentionally, but unknowingly can really interrupt
Right.
those opportunities for connection. And so leaders need to ask the harder questions. That's really a lot of what leadership is. We
Mhm.
have to ask the harder questions about where might we be getting in the way. And Philip, I really appreciated also the intentionality that you mentioned about low effort opt-in opportunities for people to try and solve loneliness.
Mhm.
In that same way, Maya, that you said you were asking people for solutions. You weren't saying, what are we doing that's a problem? You were saying, what could we do to support you in solving it, whether it's here at work or somewhere else? That, Philip, that really looks for opt-in ways that people could solve this. And I really want to challenge myself and anybody who's listening who wants to think about what pickup opportunities, in addition to basketball, which is the one that occurred to me when you said pickup, what pickup opportunities are there? You said lunch. I like that. I bet that, and it sounds like your Friday meeting offers some pickup
Mhm.
opportunities,
Yeah.
for example, and recess offers some pickup opportunities. Sometimes at recess as a kid, I played Foursquare, and sometimes I sat in the corner and read my book. And just based on whatever I was feeling in my third or fourth grade brain. And so we still have those instincts, I think, and giving people just the space and the time to have them. That's really valuable to think about. There are so many ways that we could be adding to connection. And listen, I work with some big companies who are slow to adopt the idea that, and I love how you put this, that we have an obligation to care about the people who are operating our businesses, who think, I have an obligation to my shareholders, I have an obligation to our bottom line. But we've talked about how this impacts retention, engagement, productivity, really just having the people to do the work and the work that they do. I think it's pretty clear, and the data that we could dive into if we had another hour really supports that idea. So it would be foolhardy financially to ignore this. So we don't have to talk people into kindness or caring to say this stuff matters. And some of the solutions that we've come up with in this conversation, they're not super complicated. They're not learning a new skill. They are not very expensive, and they'll pay back. They have really good ROI.
There was another thing too. Maya mentioned it earlier about people leaders or managers of people, right? And her organization looks a little bit different, but Builders First Source, we're a large organization, right? 570 locations, over 28,000 employees. We have people who have built their careers there. And so they worked really hard and they get promoted into these manager of people roles. Now, what do we equip them with so that they can see their people, identify these things, and have the conversations? And so I think there has to be something in place, or that we work on things that allow us to say, hey, you're a manager of people now. You're a leader of people. I need you to see your people. Here's some tools to help you do that.
There are so many things you're good at. And it feels a little bit like parenting, right? There's no school. You just do it and you do your
That's right.
best. And it's really important to you and you really intend to do a good job, but you've learned nothing about this in school. And in the same way, we often in businesses promote people who are very good at the work, but have not yet been trained to be those people managers.
Mhm.
Before we finish, I'd like to ask each of you a question about your own loneliness, because this is something that everybody experiences. I'm going to ask each of you to think about what's your own favorite antidote personally to loneliness. So, Leah, you smiled first. Will you answer me?
Absolutely. So I love to write. I have been writing since high school. I got my first journal. And when I got that journal, I'll tell you, it was like a tough teenage time, right? It was my relief and my release. And so it actually combats loneliness for me because I can put it all out on that page, right? And then go and connect the way that I need to connect in the world. So I do like a little solitude. I'll go to the coffee store and read a good book by myself and be gone for a minute, right? that's part of my self-care routine. But when the tough gets going for me, it's a pen and a paper, and it helps keep me right happy.
That's awesome. Thank you. Maya, how about you?
I had a few stories come to my head, but I think the one that I'm going to share, there was a time where I was combating a bit of loneliness just because I was joking around before this started about me being one of those Gen Zers that hates going into the office because I am. This is my office, my work. I work from home. So I was spending lots of time in the office. I was the only person in our HR department at the time for about 30 full-timers, 200 plus contractors, and I was just having like a really tough personal time in my life at the same time. So it was just a lot happening for me at once. And I think I felt a bit overwhelmed, even though I couldn't probably name that at the time. And I remember one of my employees, who I was not close with at the time, but I think that that act actually made us closer, just randomly sent me flowers. Like I had no idea that she was sending them. Like I mentioned, she's actually my manager now. She wasn't my manager at the time. We kind of were just working together every now and then. But it was just the fact that like I think I broke down on the call with her, actually. I started crying on the call. And then after that, she sent flowers to my house. And I just felt like that was just such a sweet thing to do. Because she didn't have to do it. And even if she wanted to do something nice, she could have like went to the HR team or like the company, had the company send it on like the company's behalf. But it was the fact that she herself did it as a person and wrote like a very cute note that I actually still have. I have it taped up to my computer, just like as a motivating like mantra for me. So yeah, I think that that was just very sweet, and I think that really speaks to kind of what we were talking here about like connection and how small that movement could be, but mean so much to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Philip, how about you? What do you do to combat loneliness?
Yeah, I'm actually connecting to what Leah said before. You know, so solitude is different from being lonely. I'm a very extroverted person, and I don't think anything makes me feel more connected than, you know, a walk in the woods and a nature bath, as my wife would said. So that's a really important part, you know, for me. And I could do it alone, but I could also just do it in quiet with someone I care about. I also just wanted to do, I'm Scandinavian. We talk a lot in Scandinavia about the importance of early childhood education and how, you know, if you would put $1 to something, early childhood education would do the best for society. I'm also very hopeful, connecting to what we're talking about, that if companies can stop seeing themselves only as there for the shareholders and actually see themselves as part of society, then they can be really active in investing in, you know, going after loneliness, and that could have the same type of impact, I believe, that early childhood education has for society. So thank you, Dr. G, for putting this up. I'm excited that I could be part of it.
I'm really glad that you were all here. And I'm so interested to know that we've all said that we combat loneliness in this one-to-one connection or solitude. For myself, when I'm feeling lonely, I'll send a message in a way that's meaningful to the other person, a voice message or a letter, depending on who it is, just telling somebody who makes a really positive impact on me that they do and how they do, and be as specific as I can. And even if before I even mail it or send it, I feel better. I feel less lonely. It reminds me of the connections that I really want to nurture. And listen, Bruce asked a really good question. He said, what are some physical signs that people are lonely? The problem is they're really individual. You know, another really important thing that you all said in different ways is you have to ask how someone is and what would help that person. We're really individual in the ways that we experience, in the ways that we express, and in the ways that we respond around loneliness. And so there's no one answer to that question. But I can tell you that the medical, physical effects of being lonely are as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this is something, just like the whole world jumped up to say, hey, smoking is bad, we should do a lot about that. We need to, in the same public health way, really think about this from early childhood to corporations to, you know, billboards and whatever it takes. Thank you all for being so generous with your time and your ideas and your thoughtfulness and intention today. I hope everybody's gotten good connection out of this. And I really appreciate everyone being here with us today. Take care.